FM. BBC Radio 2.
Please be aware that this programme contains very strong language from the outset.
Hey there, folks. You gotta bear with me, very tired of traveling, and very tired of doing comedy, and very tired of staring out at your vacant faces looking back at me, wanting me to fill your empty lives with humor you couldn't possibly think of yourselves. Good evening.
Cultures seem to throw up a hybrid like this once every 10 or 15 years. There are not many of them, because Bill was on a journey, like Lenny Bruce was, like Pryor was. He wasn't just a show business figure. He was actually trying to figure something out.
A lot of Christians wear crosses around their necks. You think when Jesus comes back, he ever wants to see a fucking cross? Kind of like going up to Jackie Onassis with a rifle pendant on,
I think it's dismissive and remiss to just call him the angry comic, because his message was such a one of love and tolerance and understanding.
Gays in the military. Now, I don't know how y'all feel about it. Here's how I feel about it. Anyone dumb enough to want to be in the military should be allowed in.
It's an amazing story. Just because it's our brother and our family, any way you want to look at it, this is a pretty cool story,
Bill Hicks was one of the best stand-up comedians ever to walk the stage. He was a self-professed dark poet, a black-clad preacher for a disillusioned generation who used his searing wit to attack government and accepted society. Or, as he simply put it, he was Chomsky with dick jokes. He could be loud, rude and confrontational, but he wasn't simply offensive for the sake of it. With a distrust of organised religion and a hatred for the dumber side of American society, he was passionate about making people think for themselves and question the status quo. But above anything else, he was just incredibly funny.
People often ask me where I stand politically. It's not that I disagree with Bush's economic policy or his foreign policy. It's that I believe he was a child of Satan here to destroy the planet Earth. A little to the left.
I'm Phill Jupitus, and I've been a fan of Hicks since I first heard him in 1991. From the moment he opened his mouth, I was in love with his sense of humour that has made him more popular now than when he was alive. Stay with me for the next hour as I take you through the life of one of the world's greatest ever stand-up comedians, who died tragically just as he was hitting his prime. And although that was over 13 years ago, find out how his comedy is just as relevant today as it ever was. But please be aware this programme does contain very strong language, so if you are offended by swearing and profanity, now would be, well, the perfect time to turn your radio off.
Oh my God. Lift me up out of this illusion, Lord. Heal my perception that I may know only reality and only you.
Bill Hicks could leave audiences open-mouthed with such a vitriolic rant that some people would get up and leave. There are numerous Bill Hicks legends in which audience members have pulled a gun on him or he's broken his leg in a fight. Some of them are even true. Most of America just didn't get his comedy. So much so that when he was alive he was more successful in Britain than he was in his home country. But what made Hicks so upset with American society that he often made it the target of his angriest comedy? It all started with where he was from.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
William Melvin Hicks was born to James and Mary Hicks on the 16th of December 1961 in Valdosta, Georgia. His dad worked as an executive at General Motors and moved with the job, eventually settling in a conservative area of suburban Houston in Texas. The Hicks family were middle to upper class with a big house and a lawn that won the local gardening prize year after year. They were also devout Southern Baptists, a branch of Christianity that takes every word of the Bible as the truth. Bill's older brother, Steve.
A lot of times over the years I've seen it sort of misrepresented that we were raised fundamentalist Christians, and we weren't raised fundamentalist Christians, we were raised Southern Baptist, and that's much worse, much worse.
Young Bill was made to go to church several times a week, helping him develop an early aversion to organised religion. His childhood friend, David Jondro.
Bill told me a funny story about his parents trying to get him to go to church, and he finally started to rebel. Bill was in the closet, and his dad was coming after him and saying, "You get dressed, go to church." And Bill said, I hate you, I wish you were dead." And his dad said, "Well, I may be dead, but you're going to church."
Although he had little sympathy for organised religion, seeing it as an unnecessary middleman, Bill was actually a very spiritual person, continually trying to work out his own point of view.
Christianity's the weird one, though. You know, Christianity's such an odd religion, you know. I was raised that way, you know, and you just suffer for it. You know, the whole image is that, you know, eternal suffering awaits anyone who questions God's infinite love. That's the message, isn't it, that we're brought with? Believe or die. Thank you for giving, Lord, for all those options.
Bill's interest in comedy started early, and although he would go on to call television Lucifer's Dream Box, it was from there he got the exposure to comedy in the first place. Bill's mum, Mary Hicks.
We made a mistake and gave Bill a television set for his bedroom when he was 13 years old. And he stayed up late at night and watched Johnny Carson, and of course saw the comedians that came on there, and that sort of piqued his interest, so he began to get books and read, and so he began to, study it. If I had it to do over again, I'd never put a television set in a child's room.
Drawing influences from performers like Woody Allen and Richard Pryor, Bill began to write his own jokes, using his older brother Steve as the audience.
Back when Bill was, 12 or 13 years old, he would write jokes down on a piece of paper, and he would slide them under my bedroom door, and then I would write notes back to them, and, this was good, or this is real funny. Quite frankly, I thought the jokes were funny.
At just 13 years old, Bill did stand-up for the first time at church camp. Mary Hicks again.
I think he got such a reception that might have been when he decided that's what he wanted to do. And we had a young assistant pastor who was the camp pastor. So I went to Holly to ask him what Bill did. And he said, well, he's very funny, but you might check on how you raised him.
Like most teenage boys, Bill was often frustrated and angry with his parents.
I never got along with my dad, man. When I was a kid, other kids would come up to me, "My dad can beat up your dad." I'd go, "When?" "He cuts the lawn on Saturdays." Nail him out there.
Kevin Booth, a school friend and author of a Bill Hicks biography, Agent of Evolution, remembers Bill's relationship with his parents.
They were just very strict, and so, Bill was a rebellious kid in a different way. Bill wasn't a rebellious kid in the way of, drinking and smoking and that kind of rebellion, but he was rebellious in the way of he didn't like people to tell him what to do.
Bill's friend, David Jondro.
He was funny with his parents. I could never talk back to my parents, but Bill was, he would read books at the table and ignore his parents. When you go over to his house, and everybody else had this experience as well, you would go over and he would go up the stairs, and his parents would start to ask you questions.
I just remember Bill's mom walked in the room, and she goes, "Who's your friend, Bill?" And he'd just be like, "It's Kevin." And you go, "You want some pineapple, Kevin?" And Bill would just be like, "Fuck you, Mom," and storm out the room, and I'm standing there by myself. And then later on, I would just go back to Bill, and I'd be like, "Dude, wasn't that a little bit over the top?" She just asked me if I wanted something to eat. It didn't bother me that much. And Bill would just be like, "Don't talk to those people." He'd be like, "I told you not to talk to those people."
It was the 1970s, and Bill attended Stratford High School in Houston. Contrary to his later image of an unhealthy, slightly overweight smoker, at school, Hicks was actually a gifted athlete and an outstanding baseball player. Despite his sporting prowess, he looked geeky with pale skin and had a terrible haircut. Hating the dumb attitude of the jocks, he just didn't fit in. Not that that bothered him, though. His friend David Jondro remembers.
Even at an early age, I found him to be a real iconoclast. He didn't succumb to the normal peer pressures of being in high school, and I found that really fascinating. You know, everyone was going to parties and, trying to be popular, and Bill had no interest in that at all.
Fiercely anti-smoking and anti-drinking too, Bill stood out even more at school after making friends with Dwight Slade, with whom he formed a comedy double act. They clowned around at lunchtime, causing such a furore that often the whole school would end up watching. His performances extended beyond the lunchroom too. Bill's mum, Mary.
The teacher called me to tell me that she had given Bill 5 minutes while she checked the roll so that he could do whatever he did in front of the class, and then she couldn't get the class back, and she wanted me to do something about it.
Apart from comedy and girls, Bill's only other interest was music. He was passionate about Kiss and Jimi Hendrix, and with his friend Kevin, formed a band called Stress. It was the start of a lifelong obsession with music that would often become the subject of his material. Here's a garage recording of Stress with a 14-year-old Bill on lead guitar, attempting Hendrix's Hey Joe. Bear with him. Bill's teenage dream was to perform on stage at the newly opened comedy club in Houston, and he set out to make this dream a reality. There was no way, however, Bill's God-fearing parents would have let him perform at a comedy club, especially being underage at a drinking establishment. Luckily, his friend Kevin could get hold of a car.
Bill would sneak out of his window and climb down the side of the roof and get in my car, and then we'd go pick up Dwight, and then we'd head downtown to the comedy workshop there in Montrose. And that's how it all started.
Bill's brother, Steve.
It's funny, to this day, my mother says, well, I don't see how he could have done that. We had storm windows on that window. Well, you know, Mom, if you're a 14-year-old kid and you're bored in your bedroom and you're motivated to do something else, you're going to sneak out that window.
I certainly was not aware that he was sneaking out, or probably there would have been consequences. So if he snuck out, he did. It's just, I have no idea what goes through the head of a teenage boy.
On February the 3rd, 1976, and at just 14 years old, Bill Hicks performed to a paying live audience for the first time. And what's more, he killed it. Although heavily influenced by Woody Allen, he had his own material with school and family life coming in for a battering. Material he was still using in his set many years later.
Oh, boy. Remember summer vacations with your folks? Did anybody get the concept behind that? We did not get along together in a 5-bedroom house. Dad's idea was to put all of us in a car and drive through the desert in the hottest time of the year. Good call, Dad. Let's confront our tensions. Remember that? It was stressful. They weren't fun. You weren't vacating. It wasn't leisure. We're going to get up at 2 a.m. I won't be on the road by 2:05. We don't have time to stop at restrooms. We're passing Dixie cups around the car. We're going to drive for 14-hour stretches in no direction whatsoever. The sun will always be shining through your window, Bill. Figure that out. I have seen the sun take turns with our car before to beam through my window. I'm in the back seat like an ant under a magnifying glass. Dad, turn the air conditioning on, please. Nope, it eats up gas. Then, Dad, you take my college money and you turn that goddamn AC on, buddy. I'm not going to be a sunstroke mongoloid so you can save 2 cents a fucking mile.
At 17, Bill's life was all about comedy. He was constantly writing jokes and coming up with routines. He was playing the Houston Comedy Club regularly, and even at such a young age he had a local following. His brother Steve again.
He told me one time to go down to the comedy club in downtown Houston, and I said, well, why? And he said, well, just go down there. And I went, and he was performing, and the place was sold out, and he was hilarious. And then the next night, I took some friends of mine with me, because I said, you're not going to believe this. This is my little brother. And we went down there, and this one girl I did not know this, but she suffered from asthma. She had an asthma attack. She was laughing so hard.
By the time he graduated from high school, Bill was a minor celebrity around Houston, with people coming up to him in the street asking him to tell jokes. While most of his contemporaries went off to college, Bill was determined to make it in stand-up, and he moved to Los Angeles at just 18 years old. Bill's long-suffering parents paid for an apartment and a car, and Bill set out to make it as a comedian in Los Angeles. 1979 was an exciting time to be in comedy in America. Author of the Hicks biography American Scream, Cynthia True.
Bill really came of age. I mean, literally, he turned 18 at the exact moment that comedy clubs were exploding all over the United States. And, you know, they used to say that they had just taken their discos that were now kind of failing, and they take out the disco ball and put up a mic at a brick wall, and suddenly you've got a comedy club. So Bill came of age and started working at a time where it was just exploding across the United States.
Almost straight away he got regular slots at comedy clubs when much older comedians were struggling to get even one. He was playing the famous Comedy Store and rubbing shoulders with established acts like Jay Leno. To most people, Bill was a success in LA. Kevin Booth.
He even got like his one big showbiz break. You know, he got a cast in a sitcom, which is, you know, amazing, because when that happened, everybody was like, wow, you know, Bill is on his way. He's only been in LA for a couple of months. He's in a pilot for a sitcom. It's just incredible.
But Bill and the City of the Angels didn't get on, and soon he began to hate the place.
Living out in Los Angeles now, L.A., or as I call it, Hell-A. And I just like getting out of there at any point, you know, just to go anywhere, you know, for the weather. They don't have fucking weather there, you know. Hot and sunny every day. Today, hot and sunny in L.A. Yesterday, hot and sunny. Every day, hot and sunny. And they love it. Isn't it great? Every day, hot and sunny. Hot and sunny every day. Isn't that neat? What are you, a fucking lizard?
Sick of life in the city and missing his old friends and a girlfriend, he soon returned to Houston. Previously, Bill had hated drinking and smoking and had ridiculed his friends for getting high and losing control. But once he was back in Houston, that all changed. Kevin Booth.
The first day he ever tried alcohol, he was like, well, you know, what's a drink? Tell me what's a drink. You know, everybody's like, it's summertime, margarita. People drink margaritas. And he was just getting ready to go on stage, and he was like, I'll take 7.
David Jondro.
Bill never would do anything just a little bit. So if he was going to smoke, he was going to really smoke like a fiend. And if he was going to drink, he was going to really pound it down. He always talked about how he was strong as a bull and he was totally indestructible.
Smoking, in particular, became one of Bill's favourite subjects.
How many smokers do we have here tonight? Smokers? Oh boy, listen to that energy they can pump out at will, huh? Listen to this. How many non-smokers do we have here tonight? Non-smokers. You hear that? Bunch of whining little maggots, aren't they? Aren't they? Obnoxious, self-righteous slugs. I'd quit smoking if I didn't think I'd become one of them.
With the heavy drinking came a new comedy direction.
When he started drinking is when he really started busting out with his personality. That was when, you know, he would get more directly to his points and more about his beliefs, his political beliefs, his religious beliefs. I think alcohol really helped him drop his inhibitions.
He ended up just focusing on certain people in the audience and just screaming at them, you know, with a lot of anger. And, you know, it was like all of a sudden all this rage coming out of Bill. And not that he didn't have rage before, but now it was just this, like, blind rage. And it was the birth of the new Bill.
Did you watch this shit? Did you watch the flag burning thing? Wasn't that great? Boy, if everyone showed their true colors then, didn't they? Retarded nation that we are. Scary. People acted as though the Supreme Court approved of flag burning. You know what I mean? Does that mean we have to burn our flags? What did they say that we had to... No! not what they said. They said that perhaps if somebody wants to burn a flag, he perhaps doesn't need to go to jail for a year. Pretty harsh on their part, huh? They said we should burn it. They didn't say that. They didn't say that. They didn't say that. They didn't say that. Does that mean I have to go out now? No. Listen, read, think, calm down, relax, shut the fuck up. Well, I don't get it. I don't want to burn my flag. Then
don't! In the early 1980s, Houston was a creative place for comedy. A group of stand-ups, fast becoming known as the Outlaw Comics, were based around the Comedy Workshop Club and were picking up a sizable following. They were a hard-living crew made up of people such as Jimmy Pineapple, Stephen Doster, Steve Epstein, John Fonetti and Ron Schock. As well as playing gigs together, they'd all hang out and party hard too. Although Bill was the youngest, it was obvious he was the best. Stand-up comedian and Bill's friend, Ron Schock.
He was so good, he was looked up to by literally everyone. And no one was jealous of him because you would watch him and go, well, I couldn't do that anyway. But the first time I saw him on stage, I went home and told my wife I've seen a genius tonight.
The Houston Outlaw Comics spurred each other on creatively, but one in particular would have a huge influence over Bill. Sam Kinison.
Well, I see the party started a little early at some of your places too, huh? You're doing the right thing. Fuck it, man. It's Thursday night. We're about to make it Saturday night. Because none of us are going to work tomorrow. Fuck it! Go in 11 o'clock, noon, wrecked, your hair fucked up, your nose bleeding. Just look at him and go, oh, what do you expect? I was with him! I'm lucky to be alive!
8 years older than Bill, Sam took him under his wing. Hicks biographer Cynthia True.
Sam was a very big influence on Bill's comedy. I think that Sam was the first person in comedy who looked something like him. Bill's influences prior to that had been Woody Allen, Richard Pryor, certainly, but nobody who came from the same Southern Christian Texan background that Bill came from.
David Jondro.
Sam had this preacher vibe. Well, Sam was a preacher. And then he started doing comedy, and Bill just loved that there was this wild man preacher. So Bill, I think, was really influenced like that. And he started doing a lot more of ranting and yelling after seeing Sam and working with Sam.
Bill also began to experiment with drugs. Kinison introduced him to the world of magic mushrooms and LSD. Biographer and friend Kevin Booth.
I remember the first time Bill taking all these mushrooms and going up on stage and basically just laughing the whole time, and the whole entire audience was laughing. And he came off just going, oh my God, that's the answer. I'm going to take mushrooms from now on. Every night I go up on stage. I was able to read the audience's mind. They were able to read my mind. We communicated on this higher level. And so I believe it was the very next night, he took him again and he went up on stage and just bombed. I think he bombed, and he ended up in a fetal position on the stage, just kind of like going, ugh, what am I doing? And the whole audience, it was just dead silence.
Although they clearly didn't work for his stage act, Bill continued to regularly take what he would call an heroic dose of magic mushrooms. For him, it was more than just getting high. Since his teenage years, he practiced transcendental meditation as part of his spiritual quest, and he believed that mushrooms could provide a shortcut to enlightenment.
You never see a positive drug story on the news, do you? No? Always negative. News is supposed to be objective, isn't it? It's supposed to be the news, but every drug story is negative? Well, hold it. I've had some killer times on drugs. I'm not promoting it, but I'm not denying it. Let's hear the whole story. Same LSD story every time. Young man on acid, thought he could fly, jumped out of a building. What a tragedy. What a dick. Don't go blaming acid on this guy. If he thought he could fly, why didn't he take off from the ground first and check it out? He's an idiot. He's dead. Good. I mean, there's one less doorknob in the world? Woo! What a tragedy. Why so down, Bill? We're missing a moron. We're missing a moron. I'd like to see a positive LSD story. Would that be newsworthy? Just once? Hear what it's all about? Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves. Here's Tom with the weather.
You're listening to Bill Hicks, the Dark Poet, on BBC Radio 2 with me, Phill Jupitus. Please note this programme contains strong language. Bill hadn't been back in Texas long when he got a call to open for Jay Leno. Back then, Leno was an exciting young comedian with a considerable national profile. He was the must-see stand-up in America. Leno had taken a shine to Bill back in Los Angeles, and he recommended him to the hot new TV programme Late Night with David Letterman, on which Leno had appeared many times. In December of 1984, Bill Hicks performed for the first time on The Letterman Show. At 22 years old, he was the first of the Houston outlaw comics to make it on national television, even beating Sam Kinison. It was a huge break for Bill, and provided him with the opportunity to broadcast his material to the whole of America. However, as would soon become a recurring theme, The Letterman Show heavily censored his set, telling Bill what he could and couldn't say. Ron Schock.
Each time he did it, you think, gee whiz, I wish they could see the real Bill. Bill is best left uncensored and unrestricted by time. A great comic like that in a 5-minute format, censored, you got to start here and end here. For them to nail that set, doing what they do, is extremely difficult.
But from the exposure on The Letterman Show, Bill was able to command more money per gig, and the offers came flooding in. He began to tour relentlessly, and in the next couple of years, he was invited back on Letterman twice more. 3 times in 18 months was no mean feat. But on the third time, Bill got into a spot of trouble. Biographer Cynthia True.
On Bill's third appearance, when he went to Letterman, he had a joke that ended with him throwing a pen in the kid's eye, and the kid is blinded, and he ends up in a wheelchair. The joke was deemed by NBC to be offensive to the handicapped, and they didn't want Bill to do it.
Bill did the joke anyway, later claiming they hadn't told him not to. Here's the routine very similar to the one Bill did that night.
I had no luck in school. One day in first grade, our teacher left the room for like a minute. We started playing keep away from this girl with her pencil. We're all in first grade. We're laughing. Y'all quit it. Give me my pencil. Would you quit it? I need my pencil. Pencil came to me. I throw it. Goes in this guy's eye. Blinds him for life. Everyone in class goes, Jesus, Hicks, it's a game. What are you, a psycho or something? Now, suddenly, I'm Henry Lee Hicks here, because this guy can't catch a number 2 pencil like a normal human. I got it. Good move, you dork. I'm an assassin now. Teacher came back in the room. Hicks stabbed him. Oh, suddenly I went for the guy. Come on. It was a childhood game. It went askew. One time I was late to class. I'm sitting down. Guy next to me yanks my chair out from under me right when I sat. I hit the floor. Even the teacher cracks up. Later on that year, that guy was late. Class had started. He's sitting down. I yank his chair out from under him. Boom! Middle of class. Breaks his back. Shit, get up. Try harder. That guy was in every one of my classes the next 5 years. Real funny, Hicks. Guy with one eye pushed him around.
That night on the broadcast, what people saw as Bill did his routine was a very awkward cutaway. Just as Bill's about to hit his punchline, they cut away and seemingly do an insert shot of the audience's reaction to something else. You don't know what the audience is laughing at because he hasn't delivered the punchline yet. Then they cut back to the stage. Bill is saying goodnight, and they run the credits. While the credits are rolling, you can see Robert Morton come out on stage and start gesturing wildly with his hands at Bill and yelling at him. And you can actually see Bill sort of saying something to the effect of like, hey man, I'm sorry.
Letterman's producer Robert Morton was furious, claiming it was a breach of their trust and network guidelines. Bill didn't perform again on The Letterman Show for nearly 4 years. Many of his friends thought he was going insane, throwing his career away with drinking and drugs and his uncompromising attitude. By 1986, the drinking had degenerated into alcoholism, and he was now regularly using cocaine. His increasingly outrageous behaviour was beginning to cause problems with club owners and audiences alike. Bill's brother Steve.
I saw him many times too drunk to finish a show. I know that he was getting fired a lot from shows because he was, from clubs because he was unreliable.
Bill's friend David Jondro remembers one particular drunken performance.
I went and saw a show one night, and he immediately started pounding down drinks right at the beginning. Ended up with him lying on his back with a microphone just saying, "Oh, you're all just lost and this country is going down the tubes," and no jokes really. And he said something about the war, how the first two people that put on uniforms were the biggest idiots of all time, and a woman stood up in the audience and said, "My husband died in the war." And Bill starts ranting at her, "Oh, he didn't die for me," just an awful, awful show, just really dark.
Hicks finally made the decision to quit drinking in 1988, and when he decided to quit, he quit. He never drank again. It had an almost immediate effect on his performances. Biographer Cynthia True.
All of the experimenting he did while he was drinking, the confrontational stuff with the audiences, the outrage that he really was in touch with, when he stopped drinking, he was really able to rein that rage in and channel it into something a lot more constructive and a lot more articulate.
He became the dark poet.
I'll tell you how you can solve this abortion thing right now. Those unwanted babies that women leave in alleys and in dumpsters, leave about 12 of them on the Supreme Court steps. This is over. Like that. You guys said we have to have them? Well then, you guys fucking raise them! Raise them, then. You fucking raise them. You raise them. You say I had to have it, then it's yours, fuck. It's yours. Take it.
With newfound focus, Bill continued his punishing touring schedule around America. But with his new anti-American material, he became increasingly frustrated with the audience's lacklustre response. Critic and Bill Hicks fan John Lahr.
You can't really imagine how somnolent America is, how sleepy it is, how it's a bit like a gigantic cat that's sitting in the sun that's just been eating all day, and it's just not bothered by much. Do you know what I mean? As long as it gets its food and gets its sleep and can stay out of the rain, it's pretty cool. And, he wanted to shake it up.
A lot of the time he was playing in some real dives to just a handful of people. He threatened to quit stand-up many times to his friends. Comedian and Bill Hicks fan Rob Newman.
I think of him as having to play these quite dispiriting comedy clubs, and some of the ones you see on some of the bootleg tapes, they're just awful, and people are serving food while the comic's on, and he was, I think, determined to not blend in with those clubs and to carry on being an artist, no matter how humiliating the circumstances were.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're doing well tonight. I'm glad to be here. I've been on the road doing comedy now for 10 years, so bear with me while I plaster on a fake smile and plow through this shit one more time.
There he is, ladies and gentlemen, just off the flight line, Bill Hicks.
All right, man. Good evening, everyone. Oh, Jesus Christ. I've had more people in bed before than this. Fuck, man. In fact, they were at the hotel, and I left them to come here and do this. Don't I feel like a fucking idiot?
Things did begin to look up for Bill in August of 1989, when the Letterman Show invited him back to perform after a 3.5-year absence. They had a new segment producer who had persuaded the show to reconsider letting him appear. They were so impressed with the first new performance that over the next 3 years he'd appear 7 more times. But he was still forced to censor his set. His older brother, Steve.
We talked about it all the time, and I always told him, you need to move around more on the stage. You're just kind of standing. He said, well, they tell me I have to stay within these 2 marks, so it just wasn't really his venue, and I think it definitely hindered his presentation to the audience out there.
In the spring of 1990, Bill's first album was released, Dangerous. The record label had hoped for sizable sales, but it shifted only 2,000 to 3,000 copies. Bill felt his career was stalling, but a trip to the Montreal Comedy Festival in 1991 changed all of that. Charles Brand is one of the founding partners of a British production company, Tiger Aspect, who were making a TV programme on the festival.
We used to cover the Montreal Comedy Festival for Channel 4, and we went out there to do that, and it was actually a relatively dull year in that a lot of the comedians were sort of second leads in second-run sitcoms, so we were pulling our hair out. And one of our researchers suddenly came back very excited and said, I've been to see this bloke at one of the small venues who's completely fantastic. And Clive Anderson was that year hosting the coverage of Montreal, and he and I went to see Bill do his one-man show, and we were completely blown away.
Clive Anderson.
The minute you saw him performing, you could see, oh, this guy's got something special. It was almost like taking on the idea of that process that had gone on with alternative comedy, the new wave of comedy that came in the early 80s. He was taking it to a new level. In a sense, comedy hasn't really raced on since then. So I think you need Bill Hicks figures to come along and boot things around a bit and say, no, I'm not doing that kind of joke. This is kind of stuff I'm going to do, and listen to me. And if it lapses into something which might offend the mainstream audience from time to time, that's not really a bad thing.
Channel 4 was so enamoured of Bill Hicks that they asked Tiger Aspect to film a 1-hour special of his stand-up show. The first Gulf War had just started, and the political climate was providing Bill with some of his most incendiary material.
I don't know. Once again, I was watching the news that really threw me off. It depressed everyone. It's just so scary watching the news, how they built it all out of proportion, like Iraq was ever or could ever possibly, under any stretch of the imagination, be a threat to us whatsoever. But watching the news, you never would have got that idea. Remember how it started? They kept talking about the elite Republican Guard in these hushed tones, like these guys were the bogeyman or something. Yeah, we're doing well now, but we have yet to face the elite Republican Guard. Like these guys were 12 feet tall desert warriors. Never lost a battle. We shit bullets. Yeah, well, after 2 months of continuous carpet bombing and not one reaction at all from them, they became simply the Republican Guard. Not nearly as elite as we may have led you to believe. And after another month of bombing, they went from the elite Republican Guard to the Republican Guard to the Republicans made this shit up about there being guards out there.
After the Channel 4 programme aired, there was an encouraging reaction from British viewers. Tiger Aspect's Charles Brand.
It got a real building reaction. People started phoning in about it. In those days, believe it or not, writing in about it. And word of mouth was great. We started getting journalists calling us. Everyone was interested, and the channel said, well, what are you going to do next?
Bill was really excited about the reaction and immediately arranged to come over to the UK to perform. Steve Hicks.
When Bill went over to England and really connected with the British people over there, I think that he found that there was an audience for that, and it made his confidence level go up fivefold.
Bill won the prestigious Edinburgh Festival Critics Award in 1991, and he toured Britain the following year. Writer and theatre critic John Lahr had seen the recent Channel 4 programme and was blown away. He made sure he caught Hicks live at a sold-out show in London. John Lahr.
What was interesting was I'd never heard of him, but they were standing 3 deep at the Dominion, which is a very large theatre. It was like 1,500. And he obviously had in England, which was A, quite anti-American as he was, and B, his idiom was irony. And so they got it.
Bill Hicks' fan and stand-up comedian Brendan Burns was also working in the UK at that time.
Something about him, he just tapped at the right place at the right time, and he just got in the cultural zeitgeist of Britain. Britain had seen a smart, savvy American that slagged America and preferred Britain, and let's face it, that appeals to the British intellectual, pretentious sensibility very, very much.
For the first time in his career, Bill really began to feel that his material was being understood and appreciated. The Dominion show was recorded for Channel 4 and broadcast as Revelations, again to much acclaim. Bill was selling out venues across the UK, and his anti-American material fell on sympathetic ears. but he could still be achingly funny by turning his hand to less serious issues.
I think I've been over here a lot because suddenly the food tastes good. So I think I'm getting used to it here. When I came over, first of all, I was pretty stunned. First of all, you don't boil pizza. Now, no, listen to me. I think. And this fascination with French fries, you call them chips, they're French fries. I love fries, don't get me wrong. If you leave here tonight going, Bill doesn't like fries, you'll be wrong. But every single fucking time you eat, come on! You're having too many fries! You're over your spud quota. Everything has these things. I saw hookers on London streets going, head and chip. You may think you've gotten good head before, but unless you've had it with a big hot piping plate of fries in front of you.
In late 1992, Bill toured Australia, but he spent much of it lying on hotel beds with a pain in his side. He complained of it constantly on the phone to friends who tried to convince him to see a doctor, but Bill refused. After the tour, he returned home to America. Biographer Cynthia True.
He was really, really excited about his acclaim in the UK. It felt really good to him, and he loved being over there. He loved the UK, and he loved the British people, but he really wanted to be successful, I suppose like any of us might, in his own country. And I think particularly because his material was so wrapped up in the fabric of American life, to have his own countrymen sort of reject that was a little bit of a disappointment.
Once home, Bill hooked up with his friend Kevin Booth to start work on his next comedy album, Arizona Bay. Still passionate about music, they also set to work on an album recording under the name Marblehead Johnson. Bill sang and played guitar, with Kevin playing the rest of the instruments.
Oh, Hitler had Ava Braun, Manson had Squeaky Fromm, Ted Bundy got lots of dates, I wonder what I'm doing wrong. I don't pretend to understand women's little quirks. Just one thing I know for sure, chicks dig jerks. Yeah.
Kevin Booth.
It was like the Christmas of 92 coming into the spring of 93, and every time I was at the studio, always complaining about this horrible pain in his side. And I was like begging him, go to my doctor. No, not interested.
In February 1993, while recording Arizona Bay in Houston, a standoff between the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms and a religious sect became international news. Cult leader David Koresh had barricaded himself and his followers in a compound at Waco in Texas, and they were being held siege by the Bureau. Kevin Booth picks up the story.
I'm turning on the TV, and it was just like frustrated guitar player, religious fanatic, shootout with the BATF, and, it was just like, no way, this story has everything. It has, like, the whole Manson thing. It has, like, the frustrated rock guitar player with the Messianic complex. It has every element we want. And it's happening only, like, 90 miles away from us. So, we drove up there.
At Waco, Bill claimed to have seen with his own eyes final proof that the American government were liars. It made him angrier than ever.
But I thought the whole thing was an absolute disaster and a debacle, and if any of y'all have been watching public access and seen the footage, which was not shown on any major news media source, of the Bradley tanks shooting fire into the compound, which I think went against the party line story, which was that they shot tear gas in order to help the mothers and the children to get out, to convince them. And anyway, so the major news said that the Branch Davidians started the fire. If I'm not mistaken, correct me when I go off the story here. And that the Branch Davidians started the fire, and all they did was shoot in tear gas. And yet I've seen with my own eyes footage of a Bradley tank shooting fire into the compound, which... Isn't that odd that no major news source has picked up on that? How do you think that's newsworthy? Because that basically means that the government, from the FBI, the ATF, up to Janet Reno, including Clinton, are liars and murderers.
1993 was the year that things began to pick up for Bill in America. Rolling Stone magazine voted him their Hot Comic of the Year, and popular rock band Tool invited Bill to open for them on their Lollapalooza tour, exposing him to a whole new audience of alternative rock fans. But the pain in Bill's side wouldn't go away, and became so severe that he had to concede it was time to seek professional help. His manager, Colleen McGarr, made Bill an appointment near her home in Florida after he'd finished a week of gigs at West Palm Beach. During the examination, the doctor said it sounded like his gallbladder and sent him to the hospital for further tests. It was bad news. On June the 19th, 1993, Bill was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The doctor said it was almost unheard of in people under 50. His manager, Colleen McGarr.
When Bill was diagnosed, he approached it as he did any kind of challenge. And I would say that Bill was 90% optimistic that he could beat this.
Bill's biographer, Cynthia True.
His doctor was amazed at the way that he accepted the news. He said that Bill, for a 32-year-old man who's just told he has terminal cancer, handled it in an incredibly calm way. After a couple of moments, turned around and said, "Okay, what's the battle plan?"
Kevin Booth.
At the time, I really thought if anybody could beat cancer, it's going to be Bill. Now, at the time, I didn't know that much about cancer. I actually went to some of my own doctors and started asking them, my friend has cancer, but he says he's going to beat it, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And the first thing the doctor would always ask, what kind of cancer? I mean, pancreatic. Doctor would always just be like, oh, Kevin, I'm sorry.
David Jondro.
The doctors was, once again, another authority figure, and I remember him telling me that he was yelling at the doctor, "You're dealing with the finite. I'm dealing with the infinite," that kind of thing. And the doctor was like, "Yes, I deal with the finite, and that's my job."
As time and treatments went on, it's fairly debilitating, and he set some goals for himself to accomplish.
His instinct was to return to the stage as soon as he possibly could, and he went right back out on tour, and he set up chemotherapy spots for himself all over the United States. He had different doctors in different places where he could stop in and get chemo and then go on stage 3 hours later.
Despite the pain of both the illness and the treatment, Bill worked with determined urgency, doing even more gigs, writing and recording material, and even starting work on a book. In September, the David Letterman Show called to ask him back for the 12th time, nearly 10 years after his debut. Bill knew this could be his last big national TV appearance, and he wanted to make it his best. As always, the set had to be approved beforehand, and the producers gave him the green light to perform. It went well. Fellow comic and friend Ron Schock.
Bill calls me right after he does the set, and he goes, "Ronnie, I nailed it. I nailed it. I hit a home run. This is the only one I've ever done on here that I'm happy with." I never heard Bill as excited about having done something as he was after doing that Letterman show.
Hicks could scarcely believe what happened next. A mere couple of hours after they'd recorded his performance, producer Robert Morton phoned him and told him that they'd cut his set from the show because of what they deemed its controversial contents. Cynthia True.
First, they told him that it was CBS standards and practices, and that they were appalled, and that they were upset. And what Bill found out several weeks later through the press was that CBS standards and practices had never said anything about it because it had never even gone that far. Letterman, viewing the performance in rehearsal, simply decided on his own with Morton that they didn't want to upset CBS, so they made the decision on their own. I think Bill considered that part of it a real betrayal.
Bill's manager, Colleen.
He was, horrified, as we all were. There was absolutely no indication that things were going to take that turn. And it hurt all the more because he had such a long-standing relationship with the show.
Days after the incident, a visibly sick-looking Bill appeared on a public access TV show in Texas, Capsized, to explain his side of the story.
What happened was I did some material about the pro-life people. And the joke I did was very simple. All I said was, if you're so pro-life, do me a favor, don't lock arms and block medical clinics. Lock arms and block cemeteries. Let's see how committed you are to this premise. Anyway, they counted that as one of the quote-unquote hot points that I touched on. Here's the punchline. Monday night during the Letterman show, a commercial airs for pro-life. So, see, we just had a misunderstanding. I thought I lived in the U.S. of A., the United States of America. Right. And actually, we live in the U.S. of A., United States of Advertising. Freedom of expression is guaranteed if you've got the money. Okay.
Bill was so incensed that he wrote a 39-page letter to New Yorker magazine critic John Lahr detailing the whole episode. John Lahr.
He was frustrated. He had nobody to talk to about it, and I think he thought, rightly as it happened, that if he could get this into the press, he could turn it around. I mean, I think as it happens, it really turned out to be a crucial turning point for him in his career.
Lahr wrote an in-depth profile on Bill that was published in the New Yorker magazine the very next month. It told of the whole Letterman episode and also gave a history of Bill's life in comedy. The rest of the media picked up on the story, and the resulting interest ended up being a positive thing for Bill. Book offers came flooding in, and Jay Leno rang him up asking him to do the band set on The Tonight Show. Robert De Niro wanted to meet him to discuss a project, and various magazines asked him to write columns. It looked like Bill's career was finally about to take off in America. John Lahr.
This all happened within the space of about a month. What I didn't know, and nobody knew, was that he had pancreatic cancer. He had it then. He knew he had it then, but he didn't tell anybody.
Just as it seemed Bill was finally going to get the recognition he so craved in his home country, his condition rapidly deteriorated. Bill's mum, Mary Hicks.
He moved back home, and we began to organize some of his material. And some of it I had not seen, and I would try to read it, and he'd say, "You don't have time to read that now. Get the filing done, and you can read it later." He just seemed to be a house of fire as far as getting things done, and it was absolutely a wonderful time.
Showing incredible strength of spirit, he still continued performing. Some of the shows were recorded for his final album, Rant in E minor. It would prove some of the best material of his career, with an almost preacher-like quality to the routines.
Here's how you evolve an idea. I'll give you an example. Why is the drug czar of this country... Well, let's go back. Why do we have a drug czar in this country? A. B, why is he a cop? Why isn't he a guy in recovery who's had an alcohol and or drug addiction and overcome it? And why doesn't he help people with the same problem with compassion rather than condemnation? Why do we put people who are on drugs in jail? They're sick. They're not criminals. Sick people don't get healed in jail. See, it makes no sense. And if we evolve the idea, you see, the planet might be more compassionate and something like heaven might dawn. I want everyone here to take the 5 dried grams I taped under your all chairs right now. Under your chairs. Check them out. Check them out. Under your chair. Let's go, man. The fucking UFOs are waiting in the 5th dimension. Let's go!
But by Christmas, Bill was very ill. He met up with his friend, Kevin Booth.
But we got to spend Christmas together. That was something we'd always hang out on Christmas, but we got to spend the last Christmas together, and we played music together for one last time the night after Christmas. And I always remember because Bill, I mean, he barely had the energy to even lift his guitar at the end. And he just, you know, he just was kind of running out of steam. And I remember him just saying, like, God, this guitar is so heavy. And it was like, wow, man, it's like really happening. This is really happening.
On the 5th of January 1994, Bill Hicks took to the stage visibly ill and frail. This would turn out to be his last performance. His manager, Colleen McGarr.
The last time he performed was at Caroline's in New York, and it was a week that he had really been looking forward to because he had a lot of meetings that week with various publishers who wanted Bill to do a book. He really wanted to do a book, and so he was very excited to meet with publishers. But his energy level had really dissipated. So, you know, and he was never someone to cancel a show or, you know, he never wanted to let people down in that way. So the last performance did not go very well. He was only able to do about 20, 30 minutes of it.
Bill returned to his parents' house in Little Rock. On the 26th of February 1994, aged 32 years old, Bill Hicks died with his parents at his bedside. By a cruel twist of fate, after 17 years of doing stand-up, just as he was on the crest of mainstream success, he succumbed to cancer. But he did manage to leave behind him a legacy of work that, in my opinion, makes him one of the greatest comedians who ever lived. seems that Bill Hicks is more popular now than when he was alive. His comedy is constantly being discovered by new fans, thanks to it being referenced many times by other comedians, musicians and filmmakers. Unusually for comedy, his material hasn't aged either. Today it still sounds as fresh and exciting as it ever was, and, more importantly, relevant. The world still needs Bill Hicks.
I often think, boy, I'd really like to hear him now. I mean, if I could talk to him and just say, oh, wait till you hear what happened since you've been gone. I can just hear the rants now.
I'm Phill Jupitus, and this has been Bill Hicks, the Dark Poet, produced by James Hale. We'll leave the final word on Bill to John Lahr.
He actually talked about being the flame of Shiva, the destroyer, and he burned Bill. I mean, he really was a flame. He did really give off this amazing brightness, and then it was over. And you can't be sad about losing someone like that, because in the time that he lived, he really did put something in life that wasn't there before.
The world is just a ride. And some people have known it. We think it's real because that's how powerful our minds are, but it's not. It's a ride. And some people have known it, and they've come here and told us it's just a ride. And we have killed those people. We love the fucking ride. You ever notice that? We always kill the good guys and leave these demons just running amok on the planet. You ever notice that? Jesus murdered, Martin Luther King murdered, Gandhi murdered, Malcolm X murdered, Reagan wounded. But it's just a ride. And since you know it, some people are tired of the ups and downs and the thrills and chills and prefer instead the quiet. They have to be told it's just a ride. Thank you very much. You've been fantastic. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. You've been great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
'88 to 91 FM. This is Radio 2 from the BBC. At 11:30, this is Fenella Fudge. The Justice Secretary, Jack Straw, has arranged to meet the widow of the head teacher, Philip Lawrence, to discuss the ruling by an immigration tribunal that his killer shouldn't be deported. Papers submitted to the tribunal by the Home Office say the man who stabbed Mr Lawrence to death, Liako Chindamo, is unlikely to re-offend, but they describe him as a serious public risk, mainly because of fears of a backlash. Chindamo's solicitor, Nigel Leskin, said it had to be decided what was best for everyone.
He has served his time in prison. He has served his punishment. That is what his decision. That's what the decision was. If we don't like the fact that he should have only been given a 12-year tariff, that is a different matter. If we don't like the fact that he should be released, that is a different matter. Those are different issues. What is issue here is he will have done his time. The parole board will decide at a particular time it is safe for him to be released.
Search teams sifting through the wreckage of the hotel which burned down at Newquay in Cornwall at the weekend say they found what they believe are human remains. 2 people who've been unaccounted for since the fire broke out are believed to have died in the building. Another man was killed jumping from a window. The British chief advisor to the Iraqi police in Basra has said that members of the force are involved in sectarian violence, including murder and kidnapping.